Good morning, everyone. Welcome again. My role here, I don't know, can you all see okay? I see folks in the first few rows, but maybe I'm not tall enough to see everybody in the back. My role here is, I think, in two parts. One is just to sort of introduce the panel and launch them in a series of responses or commentaries and further sort of elaboration on what you just heard the Commissioner talk about. And then, secondly, to engage them in a bit of a conversation and dialogue among ourselves up here, which is really all about giving you a little bit of time to prepare some questions for the panel yourselves. So we're going to hear from this group of folks in series for about the next half hour in total. Then I will ask them a few questions, and then I'll open it up to you all. So as they're talking, as we're having a conversation up here, please sort of keep in mind what you might like to ask these folks. I very much want to make this a dialogue among all of us. So with that, let me sort of shift gears into this next phase of our conversation together. Again, each of the panelists will be making brief comments, starting, so actually I think they're sitting in the proper order here. That was brilliantly done. We're going to start with Sandy Boyd, who's the Vice President for Strategic Communications and Outreach for Achieve, which is managing the PARCC consortium that the Commissioner talked about. Wanda Monthey, who is the Team Leader and Policy Director for the Maine Department of Education, which is part of the Smarter Balance, the sort of, you know, the better branded consortium of the two. Mike Petrilli, who is Executive Vice President with the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, will also will follow Wanda. And then that is not Carol Johnson down the end, but Irvin Scott, who is the Chief Academic Officer for the Boston Public Schools, will wrap up that part of it. And then they'll all sort of come back here, and I'll grill them mercilessly. So with that, Sandy, let me turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jim.
Oh, one thing is Sandy is moving up to the podium. She'll be, I think both Sandy and Wanda have slides. The slides will be available online on the website, I guess on the MBAE and or Rennie Center website, or both. And so you'll be able to get a hold of everything that you see here after the performance is over.
Great. Well, thank you for having us today. Looking forward to the discussion, and to sort of ground the discussion, I wanted to give you enough information about PARCC so that you could ask good questions and we could have a good dialogue. Both Wanda and I will tell you that the slides that you'll see on the website are about an hour presentation, and we've been told that we have 10 minutes. So if I talk really, really fast, you'll know why I'm doing that. I'm just going to hit on a couple of major slides so that we can ground the discussion a little bit. There's a lot more in here, and I really encourage you to take a look at the fuller presentation and you know, ask questions when we get to it, or ask questions of me afterwards. I'm happy to do that. First of all, just to sort of start the discussion, you know, why the PARCC states, the 25 PARCC states came together. It was really to address a number of needs across the states, including things that you've all heard, you know, concerns about having too many tests that weren't grounded in what was really important, not challenging enough to measure college and career readiness, not generating good information, especially for teachers. You know, one test at the end of the year doesn't really tell you very much during the year. Not really measuring the full range of skills, and obviously wild inconsistencies across the states. One thing that really drove the PARCC states together is a need and a real desire for comparability, and to be able to sort of compare results within and across states, and it's just not possible with current tests because they're so different from state to state. So that's what really drove the PARCC states together. And let me give you a little bit about, I guess I should stop on this slide for a second to just say, you probably know because the Commissioner mentioned it, Massachusetts is a member of PARCC. Actually, the Commissioner chairs the governing board right now. There are 15 states that are currently governing board states, including 2 that have just joined the governing board in the past week, New Jersey and Oklahoma. So let me talk a little bit about the vision. Okay, that's enough there. Now you have the vision. No, I'm kidding. I'm going to do it a little bit slide by slide. We'll go goal by goal. And the Commissioner did such a good job with this. I'm not even sure that I need to keep going. But let me talk a little bit about college and career readiness. This was a driving factor for the states that got together to put the PARCC proposal together. A real concern that nobody had a test that really gave a college and career ready score. And we know that because not just in Massachusetts, but across the country, about a third of the students that go to 2- and 4-year institutions need remediation in math or English or both. And we also know that those students, if you start needing remediation, the odds that you finish what you came to do are significantly lower. We also know that about 80% of all growing jobs are middle skill jobs or above that will require some post-secondary education, at least a year of post-secondary education. So as a practical matter, kids need to be ready for college readiness and need to be ready for post-secondary success. So here's the model that PARCC has put together. Real-time student achievement throughout grades 3 through 8, and then an assessment in high school at about the 11th grade level that will give students an indication of whether they're college and career ready. For those of you that are familiar with what California does, the EAP, it's something very similar. So while students are still in high school, they get an indication of whether they're ready for college. And they're actually told that you can get 3 things, 3 indications. 1, you're ready, terrific, keep taking math and English your senior year, and we can guarantee you that you will go into a credit-bearing course. And maybe we can't tell you which credit-bearing course. You might need to take a placement exam to figure that out. But we can at least assure you that you will enter the CSU system, the California state system, in a credit-bearing course. You could also get an indication that you look like you're on the borderline. Here's some things you need to do to get yourself ready. And you may get an indication that you're not ready. So then your senior year, you can spend some time remediating your weaknesses instead of waiting to do that for college. And so part of what PARCC is going to be doing is looking at developing 12th grade bridge courses so that students can fill those skills deficiencies, not in college, but prior to college. Because we want kids to be able to enter and enter successfully. So our second goal is to create better assessments, and the Commissioner talked a little bit about this. The marks that you see, the 25, 50, 75, those are sort of quarters, times during the year. And the idea here is that the assessment's going to be distributed throughout the year, and that the first 3 assessments will be much more performance-based. So they will be essays, they'll be complicated, multi-step mathematics problems. They will be much more like the sorts of good midterm and final exams that teachers are probably currently giving in classes. And they will give teachers more immediate feedback. I mean, one of the things that in the development of the assessment proposal that we were really sensitive to was the legitimate concern that giving a test at the end of the year really doesn't tell you as a teacher anything about how your kids are doing, whether they're on track. So this idea of knowing more immediately whether kids are getting it and are on track, and then being able to respond with kind of appropriate student supports is really a big driver in this system. Again, another goal here is that, particularly with the through-course assessments, that they really measure what really matters, and that's reflected in the Common Core. So an ability to write, ability to use argument, an ability to do multi-step complicated math problems, and to apply what you've actually learned. So it's sort of this combination of content and skills. By the way, there's somebody over here who's got like time cards, so if I really speed up, I've gotten a 3-minute warning. The third goal is to really support educators in the classroom. So the Commissioner mentioned this before. There's a whole series of activities that are beginning now and will last until 2014 when the tests are developed and ready to be given, that school year 2014, 2015, to really support educators. Professional development. What's being developed right now are content frameworks so that the assessments can be designed and developed. Those will be done with not just K-12 educators, but also with higher ed. There will be model instructional units, sample assessment tasks, lots of professional development. And again, the goal here is to make sure teachers are part of the development process, but then also understand what's expected every step of the way, and so they can use the data that they're getting from their students and use it effectively. So goal number 4 is to make better use of technology in assessments. Our goal here is that these assessments be computer-based. And again, that's part of what will allow kind of the real-time reporting back to educators throughout the year. And goal number 5 is to advance accountability at all levels. None of the assessments that are being given today were meant for multiple accountability purposes, including evaluation purposes, and we very much have that particular goal. Some of the states in PARCC have that as part of what they're looking for in accountability, and so we very much have that goal in mind, that these are much better and richer assessments that can be valid for multiple purposes. Those are the goals. A little bit on implementation. It's really important that, and we think, frankly, it's really critical that for these assessments to be successful in the year 2014-15 when they are first given, that there's a lot of implementation that needs to happen in all of the states that have adopted the Common Core. So starting this summer, for example, states will work together to figure out where they are in implementation, what other states have done. One of the huge advantages of the Common Core is that if you've adopted the same standards, not the 45 states that have done that don't need to create the same thing 45 times over. They can learn and share from one another. So we'll be gathering states together starting this summer to talk about where they're at, what they need, what they think they've got that's good, and so that they can share things. It would be creation of curricular and instructional tools, professional development, everything that you can think of. The first thing that you'll see out of the box is content frameworks. Though everything that we will do, including some of the sample prototype items, that sort of thing, probably starting this summer, we will actually put out for public comment. So everyone will have an opportunity to see what the test is being developed based on, because we really want early feedback. So I'm sure through MBAE and others, we will make sure that you all have access to that information so you can tell us what you think and whether you think we're on the right track. I know you people up here in Massachusetts are not shy about that. So we look forward to your feedback. The other thing I think it's important to mention is there are a number of supporting formative tools that are being developed as well that are important and that we have heard, particularly from educators, are really necessary to make sure that we get this right. So there's all kinds of stuff about the timeline and the committees and the governance structure, other things that are in the slide deck, but I just want to alert you to a few key things. Right now, the current timeline, we're very much in the development phase. That's why the content frameworks will come out next. It's really necessary to have those to be able to design the assessments. Pilot testing will begin in 2012, and then full administration of PARCC will happen in 2014. So it's a very fast timeline, which is why we all at Achieve and every place else have bags under our eyes. I want to leave you with this slide before I turn it over to Wanda. Lots of what I just said very quickly. I don't want to be Pollyannish about it. There are lots of challenges ahead. And I think in a lot of ways, both assessment consortia are really pushing the field. I think we all know what we want. We want better assessments. We want better data. We want better information for teachers. We want the test to assess what matters, and we want to graduate more students ready for college and career. But getting there is filled with challenges, and there are technical challenges, certainly implementation challenges, and policy challenges. The one thing I want to leave you with, though, especially, and I should have said this around the through-course assessments, I think one thing that we want very much to get past is what folks currently think of when it comes to testing. Nobody wants to have 4 tests through the year that look like a current end-of-the-year test. That is very much not the goal. But to get to this vision that I just outlined here is going to require that we get all of these technical implementation and policy challenges right. So we're glad that Massachusetts is along for the ride, and with that, I don't even think the hook is out yet. I think I did it. I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Well, good morning. One of the great things about the two consortia, I think, is that there are some commonalities, and if I were to go through all of our slides, you would hear some of the same things that you've already heard from Sandy. One of the things that I think is really important that to the country, actually, is that if you're in a PARCC state or if you're in a smarter balanced state, that when we say you've met the standard, we mean the same thing, that it's not something different or harder over in this state. That's what we have today. We have a lot of different states with a lot of different standards. I wanted to explain Smarter Balance, too. Smarter Balance is actually the merging of three consortia that started out last year when all of this looked like it was coming. There was the Smarter and all capital, and that actually stands for something, but I'm not as good as your commissioner and tell you what that stands for. But it was on technology. It was adaptive testing. That was the key component. And then there was Mosaic, which tended to be the Midwest states that were really focused on performance assessment and local assessment type activities. And then we had the balanced assessment, which was led by our commissioner in Maine at the time, and Linda Darling-Hammond. So that was more of a comprehensive look. So the three came together. Mosaic kind of got pushed out of the picture. But that's how we came to be. Our purpose is no different from what you heard from PARCC, so I'm just going to kind of breeze through these, this slide here. And again, everything is operational in 2014, 2015, which sounded like a long time ago last year. It doesn't sound so far away today. This is the map of the states. The green are the Smarter Balanced governing states. We have 19. I think what we're going to see, we're already seeing some shifting going on as new administrations came in. So I think that states will be choosing the one that they best fit with, which will be good for all of us. And what guides our work? We wanted an integrative system, one that had summative, interim, and formative assessment, just not, as Sandy said, something at the end of the year that students took and then hoped you got your results back in a couple months. We want evidence that there's through student performance. We want teacher involvement. This was a non-negotiable for some of our states as we came together, that teachers had to be involved. They had to be involved in the writing of tasks and items, and they had to be involved in the scoring, feeling, and as we do, I think, all across the country, that when teachers are involved, it's great professional development, as well as other factors. And also state-led with transparent governance. This one, we're almost like a volunteer organization sometimes. We have a member on the executive committee, and he's on call at least once a day, every day. So we are actually finding out that maybe we need to make this more formal and have more staff. It's also focused on continuously improving teaching and learning with regular feedback of progress, professional development supports. We also wanted to make sure there were multiple measures. It was not just all one form of testing. It wasn't going to be just a multiple choice test at the end of the year. And that we would obviously adhere to the same standards that are required for all testing. Our design is to get from here to here. And the first step that we are looking at, and this is the one that I guess we all have to deal with because of accountability, but it is a summative assessment. It's adaptive. Students will be given test items that are at their level, and if they do well, they will get a harder test item the next time, or a less rigorous test item, but still aligned to the standard. It's individualized. We feel more accurate. It's efficient. The results will come back within 2 weeks to, which is one of the biggest criticisms, and last night our commissioner in Maine is holding some public forums, and you heard this again, we don't get test results back in time to make any use of them. So the adaptive testing was important to us. It also will report growth and current achievement as well. There will also be multiple item types. It's not going to be all multiple choice like a lot of the adaptive testing is right now. There will be extended response. There will be short answer. There will be as many things as we can figure out how to do on an adaptive computerized test. There will also be 2 performance tasks a year for each of the content areas. So there will be 2 for ELA and 2 for math that students will do. And at the end of this program and on the website, there are 2 performance tasks. They're currently being piloted in Ohio, which is actually a joint state between the 2 consortia, but 2 teachers there are piloting those, and those are at the end, so you could go in and look at those more in depth. And then it will be offered twice. Students can take the adaptive test twice, and there will be a window of about 12 weeks at the end of the year. The next part of our assessment is an interim that is also adaptive. These items are non-secure. They will be fully accessible. Timing and content teachers would use to their own to meet their own needs. The scale will be the same as the summative. There will be performance tasks that are on there. It's a clear example of, there will be clear examples of what it means to meet the standards, and it will help identify specific needs. And the other thing about this one is teachers can individualize it, and it can be used for those end of course or end of units, or the sort of the same way as the through course assessments, that teachers could design their assessments using those resources. And then the third leg of our program, our assessment, is formative, using the tools that we have for formative assessment that teachers can use in the classroom ongoing. There will be tools online that will align the instruction with the Common Core, that will allow teachers to do that, to develop some classroom evidence, collect that. There will be some guides about formative assessment using some of that are tied to the Common Core. There's also going to be online modules that train in developing items so that teachers in their classroom can still develop items and have training to make sure that those are the best they can get by individual teacher development. And also one of the things that we're really focused on is providing online modules or online professional development on best practices and what teachers can use in their classroom. We also want it to be accessible to parents and students so that when these modules are on the web, students and parents can go in, and if they need extra help, they can get they'll be able to pull a unit off and do that right in their home. And then again, important thing to this group is that teachers be included along the way in the development. Those 3 things linked together, we feel, will mean that students will leave school ready for college and careers. This is one of the assessments that the teacher in Ohio is working on in pilot testing. But it integrates math, it integrates the social studies, it would integrate literacy. It challenges, it's got a lot of analytical skills in it, so it's got those 21st century skills above and beyond what currently is in the Common Core. So again, this is in Ohio, which is a joint state that's in both PARCC and Smarter Balance. So this is something that could go either way, I guess. But I think this leads to another thing that we're hoping in Smarter Balance, and there's been a lot of conversation with PARCC, is that there's a lot of common ground here, and we're not competing with each other. We're developing 2 systems that may look somewhat different, but it's not a competition. And there's what is PARCC doing, what are we doing? Because it's open source with the federal funds, there's a lot of resources that we'll be sharing. So it's not that you in Massachusetts will only have access to the PARCC items. You will also have access to what comes out of Smarter Balanced as well. So maybe.
Okay, good. Well, good morning. My name's Mike Petrilli. To my other paisantes out there, hello. It's always nice to be back in Boston. Before I talk about Common Core stuff, a little personal reflection. I was actually born in Everett. My parents grew up in Revere. And when Jill invited me a couple of months ago to come, I was very interested because, of course, interested in the Common Core topic and the great work you've been doing in Massachusetts, but also that my grandmother, my nanny, still lived here in Everett. And she's been sick, and I wanted to come visit her. And unfortunately, she passed away, actually, about 4 weeks ago. And I was here for the services in Revere at St. Anthony's. One thing that became clear is, you listen to the stories. She was, the daughter of Italian immigrants. She was married at 16, first baby at 17, widowed at 30 with 3 small children and had to figure out what to do. No high school education. Went out to be a waitress, put food on the table. And to help my father, who became the first in his family to go to college, Northeastern, on the co-op plan, also ROTC, and all these things that, what the great American school system was able to do to provide an on-ramp for my family, for that generation of immigrants to, go on to be, to climb the ladder, to be socially mobile. And that critical role that we're still talking about today. And that it's easy, today we're talking about some things that are very technical and very exciting. But just to remember that what this is about, when we talk about college and career readiness, we're talking about making sure there is an on-ramp for all of our kids, including the most recent immigrants from all over the world, whose parents, may not have had many opportunities themselves, but are trying to have their children have these opportunities. So the great work that you're doing and that these consortia are doing, and again, let's not forget what this is about. So with that, a little tribute. So I was invited here today because at Fordham we've been doing a lot of work on the Common Core standards as well as this question about governance. And you'll see in your packets some information called Now What? Options for Common Core Implementation and Governance down the road. At Fordham we've been reviewing state standards going back to the late 90s, and we've had content experts looking at those state standards, reviewing them, grading them. And what we found year after year when we looked at these standards was that by and large the standards were not very good. Massachusetts was an exception and was in many ways the bright star that we would point to in most subjects. But it just wasn't getting better over time. And so about 5 years ago we started to advocate pretty aggressively and consistently for national standards and national tests, both to bring commonality and to raise the bar in most states. Now the Commissioner did a nice job talking about the dilemma you faced in Massachusetts. As the city on a hill, you already had great standards and a great assessment. Was this going to be a step forward, and making sure that those standards were indeed a step forward? We reviewed the Common Core drafts and the final Common Core standards as well as the 50 standards all across the country. And we found that in the vast majority of states, Common Core is a vast step forward, much more rigorous than what they've had before. And in Massachusetts, that it is at least as rigorous as what you've got. And of course, there's now this great potential to work across state lines and to share materials. The governance issue is twofold. One is over the long term, what is going to happen to the standards themselves? These standards were developed in a fairly ad hoc way. National Governors Association, Council of Chief State School Officers, the state superintendents coming together. Remarkably, the product that came out was very good. And the question, though, is who now owns these standards? Eventually, they'll need to be updated. Hopefully, that will be a ways away. You can't imagine. We don't want to throw a wrench in this just as the assessments are getting built. But let's say 10 years from now, there should be a process to look at the standards, make some tweaks, find out what's been working. Surely they didn't get this 100% right. How is that going to work? Who's going to own these standards now that they're adopted by all the states? What kind of governance arrangement needs to be in place for that to happen? A second and more urgent question, though, is how can the various implementation tasks that are happening around the country be coordinated? And I think the good news is that what we're hearing from both of these consortia is that that is already starting to happen organically. The question is, if Massachusetts develops some great curricular frameworks, for example, using its Race to the Top money, as the Commissioner said that you would, how can we make sure that other states can benefit from that good work? We have had this experience in standards-based reform over 2 decades of maybe getting the standards and tests right, at least in Massachusetts, but in almost every place we have failed to go the last mile and make sure that teachers have the materials that they need, the curriculum materials, the materials for the classroom. Again, not mandatory materials, but things that are voluntary, that if teachers want to use them, particularly new teachers, who are still developing their craft, that those resources are there. And now with the advent of technology, so much that can be done online, whether it's tools for teachers, online training for teachers, just being able to watch videos of master teachers delivering this content, and then also tools for kids, online learning opportunities, and to be able to do that across state lines. Now, the politics of all of this has been that people are worried that we're moving towards this in this direction of nationalizing education. This is the first step. Now we've got the standards. Next we have the tests. Are we going to have a national curriculum? Are we going to have national teacher standards? On and on and on. And I think what everybody would agree is that it's got to be something that continues to be owned by the states, that is voluntary, and that is done in an interstate way. We certainly don't want the federal government anywhere near it, except perhaps as a funder of this development work on the assessments. Because we do need their money for something as expensive as that. But what can be done in that interstate partnership way to develop those kinds of materials? My understanding is that both consortia now have some resources to be able to pull states together, and that there's conversations going on about, hey, maybe you can develop this piece and we can develop that piece, and then we can share, or we can do some joint contracting for some things. That's critically important. We just think that those conversations need to be accelerated so that we are sure that when the tests come out, that there are a plethora of materials out there for kids, for teachers, that can be useful. And that this is not going to be another exercise in saying, okay, we want you to jump, and you say how high, and let's just put a lot of pressure on schools. There's also got to be that support piece. And how we coordinate that in a way that remains politically sustainable, but also very effective, is something that we've got to get done in the next couple of years to come. Thanks.
Good morning. Morning. Come on, let's try that again. I want you to do it together with a little more life than that. Good morning.
Good morning.
Awesome. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for the panelists that we've heard already. Of course, I'm not the superintendent, as all that's been said. I'm Irvin Scott, Chief Academic Officer, and I'm delighted to be here to just talk for a few minutes about the district's excitement regarding the Common Core, and I'll reserve some of the sort of comments around some of the challenges for the panelists. And what I'll try to do is sort of summarize the excitement in 2 words that I actually want you to repeat after me. Everyone say focus.
Focus.
I want you to do it together. Let's try it one more time. Everyone say focus.
Focus.
And equity.
Equity.
Those are sort of the 2 words that I want to summarize what I think the superintendent would say in terms of our excitement and what we're looking forward to with respect to the Common Core. First of all, focus. That word has actually been said by Henry. It's been said by Mitchell. They've used that word. And in many ways, this is laser focused on what the real work in school should be. The first focus I would frame is the instructional core. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with that term. It's a term that Richard Elmore uses to talk about what is really, really important in schools. And he talks about 3 things being vitally important. If you do work around these things and not specifically targeted on these things, you won't get the impact. And those things are students, teachers, and content. And that is the instructional core. And what's exciting about the Common Core is it's laser focused on that content area and what all students should know and be able to do. And of course, you can't be laser focused on content without engaging teachers and students. So that laser focus on the instructional core, I think, is one of the reasons why we're excited about it. The second thing is academic rigor. That's one of the things that we've been hearing a lot about through the panelists and have already sort of made reference to that. In Boston, we talk about academic rigor being high expectations, high relevance, and appropriate support. And we believe that the Common Core provides an avenue to getting to those things, particularly around high expectations. When we look at the amount of writing that the Common Core is going to be requiring students to do, that's something that we get excited about. We know that more writing is one of the things that our kids, particularly in the city, need to do it earlier grade levels, and more focused on information persuasive writing as opposed to narrative. We've got a lot of narrative happening in our schools. We've been moving further and further in the direction of informational, persuasive, analytical writing, and the Common Core invites that, and we're excited about that. So academic rigor is another thing. The next one is college and career readiness. I think it was Henry who mentioned the fact that MCAS was never intended necessarily to be an indicator of whether students were ready for college, but an indicator of students going in that direction. This particular assessment is laser focused on college and career readiness. We in Boston know that many of our students go to college. We have one of the highest college going rates in the country. But when they get there, they have to do remedial courses, and they struggle in those remedial courses. And we're excited about the fact that the Common Core is very much aligned with college and career readiness and aligned with many of the initiatives that the superintendent's been putting in place, particularly an increased focus on advanced placement for high school students. And then the final one in terms of focus is thoughtful assessment. And it's just really exciting to hear the representatives from PARCC and Smarter Balance speak. Already, I hope you've heard this, a focus on continuous improvement. Assessments are they're not designed to just get you. That's not why you do assessments. Teachers need assessments to learn how to continue to teach their students and improve their students' performance. So the exciting thing about these assessments is they're much more laser focused on continuous improvement. We're excited about the fact that there's a focus on timeliness. That is one of the challenges in a huge system where you have 56,000 students who have to be assessed. How do you create an assessment that teachers can learn from in a timely way, that you don't have to wait 2 weeks, 3 weeks, to get the results back? And the fact that they are thinking about that, both Smarter Balance and PARCC, is exciting to us practitioners. And then finally, with respect to a thoughtful assessment, feedback. So as I said earlier, the goal of an assessment is to inform instruction. Hopefully, teachers will then be able to use it to go back into the classroom and improve their instruction for students. So focus was the first one. The second was equity. And I'm going to do this in about 2 minutes, and I can only do this by giving you a story. I hope you don't mind. First of all, I should have qualified. I'm a teacher at heart. I taught for 11 years. Loved it with a passion. So it's very difficult for me to get in front of a group of people without going into the teacher mode. That's one of the reasons why I had you to speak back to me. One of the things we do in teaching is never talk yourself all the time, the more you engage students. So that's why I had you talk back. And by the way, you did a really good job. Great job. So I'm going to give a story for this last sort of 2 minutes. And it's a personal story, and I'm connected to the Common Core, because I've been reflecting on the Common Core in relationship to this story. So it has to do with me, ninth grade. About 25, 26 years ago, my ninth grade English teacher, Miss Scritchfield, came to the class and said to the class, everyone's going to we're going to do poetry, and we're going to learn a poem, analyze a poem, you're going to write a paper on this poem, and then you're going to recite it for the entire class. The entire class recited up front. And the poem was The Road Not Taken, and I resisted because I really wasn't into poetry. The thing that I was into at that time, I was a ninth grade student at the time, I was into football. I wanted to be the next Tony Dorsett. It's that simple. He played for the Dallas Cowboys. You guys wouldn't know that up here. But I wanted to be the next Tony Dorsett. And she said, I expressed my concern about doing this poem in front of the class, and she said, Irvin, okay, I still want you to do the poem, but I'm going to give you another challenge. I want you to write your own poem. So you have to do the poem that I want you to do, The Road Not Taken, like everybody else. Plus, you have to write your own poem and recite it for the rest of the class. Wow. So the day came where I had to recite it for the rest of the class. And I got up and I said, 2 roads diverge in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as faring, having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay, and leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubt if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. I did it. But I wasn't done, because remember she gave me 10. So I said, behind 2 backs I stand, waiting for the first back's hand, which holds the thing that makes me spring to reach the touchdown's brand. It's a true story. Sometimes I'm hit, which brings great pain, but it's even worse when my run's in vain, because some lineman jumps off sides and the ref yells out that it cost you 5. But through all this, I must keep running so the defense will think he's quite stunning. They'll key on me from that play on, but I'm determined to keep on going. I did that poem also. 9th grade. So 30 seconds. What's the point? The point is, I had a wonderful, wonderful teacher, Miss Scritchfield, who had very, very high expectations for me to analyze a poem, recite it, do a paper on it, and then to do more because I challenged her. The question is, my friends who didn't have Miss Scritchfield, what were they getting? The English teacher down the hall, or the English teacher in another school in that district, or an English teacher in another state in that state, Pennsylvania, or an English teacher across the country? Were they giving the same challenge that Miss Scritchfield was giving me? I don't know. The exciting thing about the Common Core is it gets closer to ensuring that it's not just a Miss Scritchfield who pushes, but all across this country and all across this state and in Boston, all across this city, teachers will be pushing students consistently so that they don't necessarily end up football players, but they can become chief academic officers. Thank you very much.